Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of the Rappahannock. My name is Marley Avant, and I will be your service leader today. We are really delighted to have you and any Zoom people here with us today. We are a vibrant community that's made up of individuals that come from diverse backgrounds and beliefs. Yet we learn from one another. And we hope the world begins to learn from one another too and listen to one another. Thank you for joining us today. Your presence means a lot. And we will have refreshments in the back, and check your bulletin for any upcoming announcements. And if you haven't already turned off your cell phone, now's a good time to do that. May this light fill our hearts and this beautiful sanctuary today. The summer solstice, as you all I'm sure know, will be June 20th. And this is a time when the sun is at its northernmost point in the sky and marks the longest day of the year. I think we're already beginning to feel the warmth of that light, as it was so exciting to see so many across America speaking up and stepping out. It was just beautiful. And even here, even in our little Matthews, and something that I know happened in Matthews, and I think happened in a number of places, that MAGA people showed up, but they ended up in a conversation. So this light, it's going to keep pouring in. And by the 20th, it's just going to shine bright. Today, we are celebrating the many faces of fatherhood and the diverse ways in which love and guidance are shared. We honor all who step into that role, whether you're a biological father, a stepfather, a guardian, a grandfather, an uncle, a mentor, or as LGBTQ, someone. I want to especially say that as we reflect on the profound influence of these relationships, I really want to recognize the unique journeys and challenges faced by all father figures, and particularly the LGBTQ plus community. Your courage to love openly and authentically inspires us all and helps us to create a world where every family can thrive. And, I actually believe that has added to our courage to step out and speak our truth at this time. So thank you. It is essential to recognize that not everyone has had a positive experience with fatherhood. For some, this day may bring feelings of sadness, of loss, maybe even of anger. If you face challenges in your relationship with your father, know that you are not alone. Certainly, our hopes are that you have been able to seek out other sources of love and support, grandparents, teachers, mentors, friends, and even yourselves, as you find your inner resilience and heart to create your own legacy of strength, love, and kindness, regardless of the past. Today, may we honor all experiences and embrace this diverse ways we can find connection and support in our lives. I have a reading that I came across that I thought just gives us another perspective, which I think is always important to have. We haven't always gotten along. In fact, we've had more than our fair share of turbulent years. Step parenting, my brother and I, couldn't have been easy, especially being a lesbian of lesbian parents back in the 1970s and 80s. No one could really talk about it. Perhaps I fought with you because it was easy, much safer to hurt your feelings than my mother's or my biological father's. Perhaps I fought you because that's what kids and parents do when they're struggling to balance independence and responsibility. But you always encouraged my dreams, and you always wanted me to be my best self, just like you do for my children. But one thing I know for sure, no matter what I said or did, you would never go away. There was so many things you couldn't control, like the simple fact that you were in a same-sex relationship at a time in America when that was abhorred. You couldn't make us happy because happiness comes from within, but you could control if you stayed or left. And you always stayed. I think sometimes life is harder than we think it will be when we're children. I know parenting is harder than I thought it would be, but you managed the most important aspect of parenting. You gave me security. No matter what, I knew you would love me anyway. No matter what, you would help me if I was in trouble. I've been poor, depressed, sick at varying times in my life, and I always knew if I asked, you would be there. Even if you were sick or hated my spouse or thought I was making a mistake, you would do whatever you could to help me. This is the kind of unconditional love we all talk about. It's not about agreeing about everything or liking to do the same sorts of activities. It's about knowing that no matter what, the people who love you will always be there, in good times and bad, sickness and health. Words that we say so often and rarely mean. There is no unless in the way you love me. You will love me no matter what mistakes I make or pain I cause. And I have relied on that love more than I have ever admitted, and my children do too. I see how much they love you and how gentle and patient you are with them. So happy Father's Day, Pat. I love you too. So this is your time now. This is your time to share. Some of you already have, but if other stories come up, this is your chance to share what fatherhood, what mentoring, what being there for children, what it's all about. And I want to comment on something that William said that I learned in numerous ways, but one of the ways is when I was a CASA advocate. And Roy was too, actually, and two of the little girls had been abused by their grandmother's boyfriend and sexually abused. And anyway, so I was with them through all that, and we went to court, and I was also fighting for them to have the foster parent who was one of the daughters of the mother. So she was actually in some ways related to that child. But we went to court, and that mother insisted on standing up to that individual that did that. And she said, saying that they trusted you, and now you're making them look like they're liars. And please, I just ask you, please now speak the truth. And he didn't do it right away. And the judge said, do you understand the opportunity you're given here? And finally he spoke up and he said, well, I wanted to say it wasn't me because I was drunk. He said, but I was abused and I passed that on. And he thanked the soon-be stepmother, thanked her for putting an end to that legacy. So these people that stand up for this things are passed down. I went home. They wanted to go out to lunch and celebrate. I went home and went to bed and sobbed. I just sobbed for the continued passing down from generation to generation abuse. So even the abuser is a victim. And I think this happens with sometimes the fathers that abuse. So it is a place to bring light in and to bring love in and to share whatever it is father represents to you. So I open the floor to anyone who'd like that. Kelly?
Well, my dad's name is Robert Earl Crum, or Bob. I was lucky enough to have most of the time with him because I'm the firstborn. Dad left us about 10 years ago, though, due to dementia, Lewy body disease at 73 years old. But that's not what I want to focus on. He was a man before his time, someone who chose the right thing to do, bucked the establishment, and was active in social justice, though he never thought of it as that. I remember being at civil rights marches as a little kid. In fact, we got in trouble because we were giving out Black Panther information, which we, as little kids, we didn't know. Little side note. He was the guy who befriended the first Black man to be hired at Jersey Central Power and Light. And then he refused to cut his hair and beard, stating how did that affect his job performance. This put our whole family on the journey to travel the U.S. in school bus that he converted into our home. The New Jersey house and possessions, they were sold. And I probably could do a whole service just on that topic. I do have a newspaper article over here about part of that with my dad, and you'll see my whole family there. We ended up in Virginia, so my parents could be house parents to adults with disabilities at Innisfree Village outside of Charlottesville. Dad built the greenhouse there. As you can see, he was very handy. I believed he could fix or build anything. Later in life, duct tape was his big deal. He was a red-headed Irishman, though. So his temper at times you did want to avoid. And later in life, he actually apologized. He had read something about being a toxic parent. And I believe, as you guys keep saying too, is that we do tend to carry our parents' issues with us. And if you don't pay attention, you don't even know it. And you really do try to do the best you can do at that time with the information and resources that you have. He was a very strong individual with big energy. One of my sisters said, you always knew when he was in the room. And we laugh now because mom's the drama queen, not since dad is, and we do tell her, I'm a Karen. He really placed value on being his authentic self and really caring for others. We had many people over the years, both family and friends, living with us as they needed a place to stay. I fondly remember playing football with him, and we'd do our special rush where we'd all run out and go. Working in the garden, you get the spoon, but dig up your potatoes. We had lots of animals, lots of pets, taking care of those. And then he built Crozet Pizza. He was the only pizza maker during his time there. He built all the tables inside, did the walls, did the wiring, and I remember helping him. I remember learning how to do the wiring piece and all that. It was really a family affair for a long time. My sister owns it now. At Crozet Pizza, he taught me how to count change back to customers. I learned customer service, and I definitely learned a work ethic. One of his favorite sayings, which I've passed on to some of my students, if you have time to lean, you have time to clean. He taught me so much, probably without even realizing it. So this article is written up. It says long hair is costing him his job with the power farm. And they actually put him on suspended leave with no pay. But it really this is what he started taking that school bus, converting it into our home. I was 10 at that time. it was just my life. So when I hear other people's stories, sometimes I'm like, oh, that's interesting. My life is a little different. But one of the things that says in here that I really says, it would be easy to cut my hair and trim my beard. But I don't see how I can do that without betraying my principles that he holds so dear. But it's up.
So this is my dad. He died when I was 18 years old. This was taken mostly as I remember him. So this stands or hangs on my family gallery wall. I regret, after listening to everyone this morning, I regret that I never got to know him as an adult. I only knew him through the eyes of a child. And I don't think I really knew him very well, although there are things that I do know. And one of them is the story that I'm going to tell you today. I grew up in a small town on the South Platte River in Colorado. When I was in the 7th grade, I became a member of the Junior Conservation Club. I remember our teacher's name, Herb Hogstrasser, who led our mission to rehome animals into protective environments. My dad worked in the oil fields as a tool pusher, and when the wells didn't produce, he was on duty during what was called dry watch. One unforgettable night while on dry watch, my dad caught a mother rabbit and her 5 babies. He brought them home for me to release into the habitat. We placed them in a tall cardboard box next to my bedside for the night, and I fell asleep anticipating taking the rabbits to school the next day. In the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of thumping as the rabbits tried to jump out of the box. To get some sleep, I moved with my blanket and pillow to the living room floor and quickly fell back asleep. However, I didn't sleep for long. I felt something pulling on my hair and discovered that it was one of the rabbits chewing on it. Soon I felt rabbits jumping all over me and all around the room. When we woke up the next morning, my family helped me catch all the rabbits except for one. We didn't give up and eventually found the last rabbit inside the springs of a swivel rocking chair. We pulled her out, possibly saving her from being crushed if someone had sat in the chair. I don't remember what happened next, but I'm pretty sure that this rabbit family was released into their intended habitat. Thank you, Dad.
I had the benefit of having 2 fathers. My birth father, John Bandor Schwertman of Fort Thomas, Kentucky, I have his middle name, met my mom, Janet Ingersoll Brown of Boston, Massachusetts, at Oberlin College in Ohio. Both of them were dynamic folks who suited each other in spunk and determination. They both served in the Army during World War II. John in Germany in a program retraining Hitler youth to regain some of their childhood and perspective. My mother was a recreational worker for the Red Cross in the China-Burma India theater. They reunited in Germany at the end of the war and returned to the US to start a family. My father worked at the University of Chicago as the assistant director of the Center for the Liberal Education of Adults. I honestly remember only snatches of him competing with my sister, competing with my sister for the last sips of his beer, bouncing on his knee, spending time in a trailer in what is now the Indiana Dunes National Park. He taught me not to be afraid of the black racer snakes that were so common in the dunes. And yes, they ate frogs and toads that I liked to play with. But this was part of a big story of life which encircled all of us. One night when I was almost 4 years old, a big thunderstorm was rolling in, and my father was killed in a freak accident when lightning hit our trailer. I don't know how much I comprehended at the time. I certainly didn't accept from his mother the idea that God needed a good angel. God supposedly had lots of angels, and I had one father, so why? Losing John from our lives was overwhelming, but I grew up and was able to think things through. I think I learned many lessons that shaped and benefited me. Bill Hutchison came into our lives when I was about 10, and I was like, he's nice, but he isn't my dad. Bill was sweet, gentle man who sat and spoke with me when I couldn't sleep because a teacher had told our class that lack of sleep could stunt your growth. We took long walks. He taught me the virtues of Big Angelo's way of walking. We recited poetry as we walked, and he pointed out birds and flowers to me. I came to feel that while he wasn't dad number one, he wasn't supposed to be, and I was closer and more like him than the other members of my family. Some people who have known both of us agreed with that. He was a savior of his eclectic UU church and the calm when our mother became overly domineering. I firmly believe that if UU's had saints, he'd be one. When he passed away in 2011 and his side of the family gathered for a memorial, I learned a whole new pre-Janet and kids side of him. Wow, I wish I had not been so wrapped up in my own life and so influenced by my mom. I had given almost no thought to what he had been before his marriage to Mom. I knew of his work as an analytical chemist, worker on the Manhattan Project, and his stint in the Panama Canal area. But his brothers, sisters, cousins, nieces, and nephews filled out his life for me. I wish I had known that, Bill. We cannot go back in time, but those two fathers, one a firebrand and the other a common, caring UU saint, helped make me who I am today. I honestly have no memories of anything troubling. Well, Dad John spanked me once when I was being obnoxiously hysterical over removal of a splinter in my finger. And Bill used to ask me to recite sections of the periodic table of elements. Oh boy. The losing of someone important in your life leaves a big hole. While you cannot completely fill that hole, you can plant flowers around it and have a quiet memory every time you see a snake. Realize that you are slouching as you walk, or think of a poem.
So this is my dad, and he died in 2007 from Alzheimer's. Actually, fell, broke his hip, then ended up with pneumonia because you can't recover. So anyway, he was a really good dad. I hear all the stories, and I really take them to heart because in many ways, I had a pretty normal life. However, like William, I went through a lot of struggles growing up and dealing with fatherhood, not quite understanding what it was supposed to be, although I had a very active father. Trouble is, he had probably 2,000 children because he was a professor, and they all took precedence. And so as the stepchild of his children, I got to know a lot of his students, and they were like brothers and sisters, and we all kind of gathered at parties, and so that was part of our life. But what it taught me was that, friendships come in many, many sizes and ages, and So I was really being introduced to a more a bigger world, a bigger family. So, I have to really respect that from him. It was unusual. I never got to biologically father any children, but I got to stepfather several and have today Lucas and Emily and now 9 grandchildren. That it has been a real uh, reflective point for me because I get to look back on my dad's experiences and like William was saying, he grew up with his limitations. I grew up with mine. We all have limitations. We all have negative experiences and positive ones. His father died when my father was 19 and he found his father in the bed. So, he went through a lot and I've been through my things and he's been through his, but I just thank you for having this day of honoring fathers special.
Well, I don't want to say too much, but I do want to say a few things about my own father, whose father deserted him and his brother and his mother during the Depression. He left to go seek work and left my grandmother behind with these 2 little boys in Montana, where they didn't have running water, and she had to end up worked in a coal mine for a while. His mother did. And she took in laundry. She did all kinds of things. One of my father's brother had to haul water, so she could take in laundry to support them. They had a tough time. And my grandfather, my father went to see his father a couple of times. He remarried and came back and was actually a bigamist for a while because he hadn't gotten a divorce before he remarried. He remarried a couple of times. So he wasn't the greatest role model for my father, but my father spent his whole life really, really trying to learn from experience and do better and better and better and to be more and more moral. That was his quest. And he really tried, and he apologized to us. I remember there were like funny little things, little glitches or things that bothered me that he listened to near the end of his life that were like really very trivial. He used to tell a story about how when I was born, I looked like a skinned jackrabbit. And at one point I said, he never really understood why I didn't particularly like that story. But at one point he said, well, no, it wasn't really me who said it. It was somebody else. He repeated something that somebody else at the delivery room said, one of the other fathers, because I was premature. So I guess I did look like a skinned jackrabbit, and I'm repeating it right now. But he really, really listened and tried, and he had an amazing life, and he was so proud of his life and his hard work, but he had this kind of humility at the same time. So he was always trying to do better, to give up swearing and to give up spanking and all those other things that he did early on. Anyway, I had a wonderful father.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to remember our fathers. My father was Robin Charles Foster, and he and my mother made a life intensely of their own. They both came from broken families. My mother's father was famous for being a brawler, and he was fighting with his wife and things being thrown and carrying guns around and getting in fights. He died early when I was a little girl. My father's father was an alcoholic, and he got divorced from his wife, my grandmother. And I remember meeting him once. He was working at the Boilermaker. A little kid taking to meet him. My father basically had no contact with him. So they determined to make a life together, and they did. Stuck together. His dad was a big, strong guy. He was sort of stiff. He had acromegaly as a child, and he had great big bones, huge hands. Mine just dwarfed by him. Big and heavy, wide, big head, tremendously strong. Very definite opinions about things. He had political opinions about things, and I've never heard a contrary word from my mother until after my father died. She had 13 years after herself. She became active. Political things. She had opinions and that stuff, and never knew what she had about before. Dad was, I guess, so surprised by me. I came along. He was in his 40s, and he had again he was sort of a stiff guy, but strong. But he did a lot with me. He sort of had enjoyed having a younger child to do things with, and Boy Scouts and shooting, and his sport was small bore rifle shooting. He was world class small at that, and I did along with him. I finally gave it up because I wasn't really interested in myself, but it was good thing to do with him with father. He's definitely a force in my life. A force of will. He do get things done and just do it. And he was an engineer, even though he had not graduated from college. He taught at college level courses, engineering. He was too young to fight in World War I. He was a boy with playing soldier at that era. World War II, he was too old to be drafted, but he was an engineer, so he went into the Navy. He worked at the Naval Test Center at Piney Point, and he was testing electronics in the planes. Well, the test pilots were test flying them. I guess as far as the need for fathers, yeah, I find since he was very good at some things and not at others that I was interested in, found other substitute fathers for those kind of things, check guy coaches and whatever. And they sort of substitute fathers were part of my life. And so fathers are important. I guess I'm always amazed by how it passes down. I'm always amazed by my son, what a wonderful father he is for his 3 children. How involved in their lives. That's my father's story. Thank you.
This is a short story because I spent a short amount of time with my father. This is my father. For those of you who want to see it. Most of you remember year before last when I told you I had reconnected with my brother that I had not seen in 34 years. Remember that story? Well, and then you remember last year when I told you I connected with my older brother who is about to be 91. You remember that story, right? He had fallen and was in the emergency area of the hospital. That tells you something. That was 27 years without a loved one. And then my father divorced my mother when I was 6 years old, and I didn't see him for 30 years. So I was 36 when we reunited and found this man to be a loving, sweet, kind individual who was reticent to open up to people, yet he had so much in him that was good. And later, I had 14 years with him. He died at 91, and later, before he died, and Molly was in the picture, he was absolutely in love with her. He thought she was the neatest thing that ever lived. So we had great times together. So even though you don't know your father, when you find out who he is, it can be wonderful. Thank you.
I'd like to share a lesson I learned from my father when I was in my early 30s. He was an alcoholic, a functioning alcoholic, a successful businessman until lunchtime when he started drinking, and then he became obnoxious. Well, there was a family function, and I decided I'm going to get drunk. I'm going to drink. I want to show my dad what an asshole I can be. And I was. Now I'm in my young 30s. And that night, home in the kitchen, we were both being assholes. My father has never struck me until that night. And he whacked me. And he said, "What do you want me to do? Tell you I love you?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "I love you." And we hugged each other and we cried. But the lesson I learned as a father, I always told my kids, "I love you," and held them and let them know today I love you and how important you are in my life. That was my lesson I learned.
Well, I'm going to share about my father. He was an Oregon boy. And what part of Oregon were you? You were in Oregon also? Yeah, well, Dad went to college in Portland, and he lived in McMinnville. Yep. And he was a farm boy at heart. And later he graduated from college at 18 and joined the Marine Corps and wanted to be an aviator. And along the way, he met my mother. They were on a double date, but they each had different dates. And she waited by that phone the next day, hoping that he would call, and he did. And those two truly had a love story. I love this picture of them. It was taken in South Carolina for a magazine, and they're dancing on a black and white checkerboard square with a saxophone player. And they were at that time in their early 80s, I think. And they were lockstep with one another. We could not go to one to get one thing and then go to the other to get another answer. That never happened. And they just, my mom she was kind of a father too. Little tiny blue-eyed thing, but boy, she was like Dad. And a story that I love to tell became sort of a family tradition is that when Dad was an aviator and he was flying in the Korean War, and she would send him off. And at that time she was wearing shocking perfume, and she put some shocking perfume in his sleeping bag. Well, you can imagine when he rolls it up, and he takes it and it's on a plane and the heat and whatnot, and he unrolls it. And the men, he said to Mom, "Don't ever do that again," because he could not live that down. But the other thing is that she would always send him off when he was in danger. She'd say, "Fly pretty." And that became a family saying, "Fly pretty." And you'll hear it from me if you drive pretty, ship pretty, sail pretty. So, and he is also the one that was just so open-minded. And I realize now part of his finding, I didn't find out until I was in my 30s at a bar mitzvah that my parents were invited to, and that I was at because I decorated all the tables. He leaned over at one point and he said, "Well, you're Jewish, don't you?" And I said, "I'm in my 30s, and that's the first time I learned I had Jewish heritage. My mother was adopted, so I don't know that side. And there's English. But he always told my brother and me, religion and spirituality, they're very sacred things, and they're personal. They're unique to every person. You have to find your way." And so he told me and I've told you all this, to attend different churches. And I'd come home and he'd always sit me down. He goes, okay, how was it? Tell me, what did they say? What did you, and oh, and you did you believe that? And he just really, and he said, well, what did you believe? And what have you found in common? And I'm just amazed at this man back then that was a Marine aviator, a farm boy at heart, that had, I used to call him my philosopher king because he had such a brilliant mind. He was the youngest lieutenant colonel in the history of the Marine Corps. He had a brilliant, brilliant mind. And in the end, he ended up drinking. He lived with us. My beautiful husband took all of my family in, and my parents lived with us. But at the end, his fight was with his body. And there were just so many profound lessons of me having to let go, that if this was his way to drink himself to the end, that I would be there for him. And that's how it was. I learned that my suffering was wanting things to be other than what they were. So up until the very end, and then he got just softer and gentler. And when he was on morphine at one point, he was really panicky about something. I said, Dad, what is? He says, the cockpit, the instrument panel. And I go, what? And so I go up to the instrument panel. I said, what do I need to do? And I start to reach here. No. And I'd have to just pretend that I was up in the cockpit panel. And I'd say, is it a lever? Is it where? It over there? And so he guided me, and I finally got the lever that he wanted me to pull. And I realized afterwards that was a trauma held in his body for many, many, many years. So I've had a very different, same thing with my mother, is when she was on morphine, I knew to work with these traumas that were held in the body, and often what they start talking about when they're under morphine can often be related to that. So I'm meandering on. And a special thank you to my husband, who's been a father extraordinaire with our son, with our granddaughter, and with my parents. In many ways, you stepped into that role for the family. So I feel very, very blessed. And I feel very, very blessed that we had this heart-to-heart today. You know, this sharing and honoring our ancestors. And to those that have healed the legacy, because I know what a wonderful father you've been. So healing those legacies, and that's what Roy has done. And so many of you, William, it's beautiful. So, I will extinguish this flame that's almost extinguished. There we go. May this light that has been so bright today in this fellowship, and I think in all of our hearts, may it continue to grow and be carried out in this world that needs this kind of light and love. So happy Father's Day to everyone who has embodied the spirit of fatherhood in all of its beautiful diversity. May our hearts be filled with gratitude for all the ways that we have been blessed and all the ways that you have blessed children and families and changed a legacy to make for a better future. Until we meet again, may that growing light carry you forward in joy and illuminate all those on your path. And so may it be. And so it is.